Okay. My name is Jude Mooney, and thank you for joining our Spotlight talk today with Jovi Schnell. The SF Artist Alumni Talks are monthly, and each month we highlight one SFAI alumni. We want to just take a quick minute to thank our donors to make these talks possible. Your comments and your questions today can be added to the chat, and we'll address those at the end of Jovi's talk. Jovi was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, and raised by a single mom with close ties to an intentional community, striving to create a feminist utopian society in the Ozarks. Growing up in an experimental nature worshiping culture rooted Jovi's connection to nature and biological systems. She always knew she wanted to be an artist, and from an early age, she pursued her passion. She received her BFA in painting from the San Francisco Art Institute in 1992, and then pursued an art residency in Amsterdam at the Ateliers, finishing that in 1995. She received her MFA in 2017 from UC Berkeley in art practice, and with more residencies to follow. Her first solo show was in Brooklyn in 1998. And she's been showing continuously since then in too many galleries to list. But her work has been seen in the Brooklyn Museum, the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam, as well as the Berkeley Art Museum. Her public art is an important part of her work. Recently, she completed a mural in the El Segundo Public Library. I would describe her practice as interdisciplinary, using paint, wood, tile, mosaic, poetry, and sometimes the roll of the dice. Her work has been described as a psychedelic Garden of Eden, part religious, part pop, a sci-fi landscape of organic mechanical overload, and mazes of eye candy. And that's all I have to say for now. Jovi, it's your turn.
Oh, thank you so much for that generous introduction, Jude, and thank you so much for having me here today. It is an honor to be with you here to share my work. I am going to start out, I guess here with my, let's see if I can get it in slideshow view. There we go. I'm going to share some projects and public art and studio practice from work over the last 20 years or so. I've titled this, Ask Me About Electric Space Gardening, and we can, do some questions at the end. So I have actually quite a bit of imagery of this recording all over the slides, but I've made little notes to kind of like prompt me along and help me stay on the slide talking point. But I have been thinking a lot about how my, growing up and my background has shaped my work subjects and interests, and growing up within the backdrop of the idealisms of that time in the women's back to land lesbian community in the Ozarks of Northwest Arkansas. And so it seemed like a natural kind of progression that I would find my way to the farm while attending the San Francisco Art Institute. The lure of the Ecotopia by the freeway really was no longer a farm and had over the years been supplanted with punk concerts by that time. But Mark Pauline's studio of survival research laboratories was still sounding off with explosions and lively activity. Those unfamiliar with the SRL performances, they would take like custom built robotic machines and make them compete and destroy each other. And they were like these sort of insane data spectacles. So it was sort of like the contrast already of like the garden and the mechanical, I feel like in hindsight was kind of really there. There's this great book that the farms included in called West
Raymond, a picture of Raymond.
Art and the Counterculture Experiment in America. And this is a picture of Ray Mondini. I can hear you. He really, it was just his jazz beatnik Socratic method of lecturing was so infectious. And rest in power, Ray, if you're listening. Other teachers that were really important to me were Jeremy Morgan and Carlos Villa, Pat Klein, Doug Hall, and Kathy Acker kind of, gave me the courage to write, I think, initially. There was also this mysterious physicist whose name I couldn't find on any of my transcripts for any of the classes. He was a Berkeley physicist, and he had this class, Cosmology and Imagination, which introduced these really radical concepts into my, 18-year-old brain at the time about quantum mechanics and other ways of like perceptual space and physics. And the San Francisco Art Institute was really like the beacon, the place to study if you wanted to study solely fine art. And it's just, I met my creative family there, and I'm still like in contact with a lot of people from that time. And it really was a special, special place. When I had the privilege of returning to study at Berkeley, I had written in my statement that I really wanted to dive more deeply into the relationship between peoples and plants, because my work has been including a lot of imagery of plants and kind of systems and the relationship between people and plants. This is a poster for People's Park in Berkeley. So in his book, The Garden of Eden, The Botanic Garden and the Recreation of Paradise, John Prest posits that the Botanic Garden initially was a recreated Lost Eden, that until the 15th century, Europeans actually believed this utopic space could still be found through voyage and exploration, colonization. The original botanical garden had been laid out like a book and made to act like a physical model of an encyclopedia. So it's sort of like this pop-up pedagogical place, a way to contain and collect the infinite through botanic specimen. I'd actually found this book while teaching at SFAI, and I had the privilege of working there starting around 2004, teaching painting classes, and just such wonderful memories of spending all those hours in the Bremer library in the stacks, pulling book after book, piles of books, taking them down into the painting studios. But so, yeah, this promise of the garden sort of looming writ large in my work. Also, these sort of sticky ideas, I feel like I guess Daniel Dennett called them skyhooks, these kind of ideas you get stuck on or that are really sticky or really give you a lot of juice for creativity, is this idea of the primal plant. It was like this hallucination that Goethe had in this garden in Padua. And he wrote, "The primal plant is going to be the strangest creature in the world, which nature herself shall envy me. With this model and the key to it, it will be possible to go on forever inventing plants and know that their existence is logical. That is to say, if they do not actually exist, they could, for they are not the shadow phantoms of vain imagination, but possess this inner necessity and truth." So it's sort of like, this space between like romanticism and natural philosophy going on that was also really fascinating for me. Ultimately, I think the Reflanze is sort of like this self-repeating sequence of metamorphosis for Goethe, or like this, way of imagining creativity. These were a series of works, a tree life series that I worked on and showed with the Gregory Lynn Gallery in San Francisco. And they both contain collage elements in them. A lot of collage running through my work and has been important for my work, where I would take elements like the knot or the eyes, stamp them, collage them into different configurations. So it's sort of about that endless, possibility or protean kind of experience. This series was called Primordial Pulse. And I think about bodies of work kind of like related to making musical albums. and that I moved from kind of like album to album until sort of the ideas exhaust themselves. But I always think, you know, that musicians really have that like freedom to really dive deep into like a concept album, and I really connect with that idea. This was a series called Free Categories, where I was really trying to like emulate or become kind of like a computer, or thinking about like computer memory and storage. And I was starting to introduce more intentional chance-based operations into my work and rolling dice. I was numbering my paints and rolling the die for each move in the painting, working left to right. And I was working with the slips of paper that I had in a bucket that I was calling my brain dump, that had phrases like glocal and live stream and up in the cloud on them. And was looking at a lot of, or, you know, phrases that would combine two different words together, and sort of how, yeah, technology creates new languages. This piece is called Solar Flowered. So a lot of my pieces have, you know, sort of like this cross-sectional view in them, and kind of play with a schematic. I do mix like imagined systems with more studied ones, but I'm not necessarily illustrating them exactly. They sort of like get me into the piece, and then the thing kind of takes over. I started creating also these acrylic skins. Most of all of my paintings are that you see here today are acrylic based. And this series was playing with making skins, building up acrylic skins, and then bringing them onto other surfaces like paper and canvas. This too was on an acrylic skin that I painted, focusing on the motif of the tree of life. And I was including also words into these sort of like fountain-like trees as a way to kind of give the piece a meditation on the action of what it was doing. This piece was called Willow Wishes, with the word desire kind of pouring into the cups. Late bloomers. I was attempting to kind of like map the characteristics of some of my closest buddies onto plants, and then kind of interconnect them all together. So this idea of like mapping or remapping plays plays a good role in my work, I think, or like translating things from one thing to another, in kind of iterative, playful ways. This piece is called Oh Grow Up. And also playing with like the body and the ideas of anthropomorphic metamorphosis, and just also like silly jokes sometimes run through my work. This was actually shown in the Economy of Means at the 25th Bravo Biennial Humor and Satire and Art, and found a home there. I guess they liked it a lot. This was a mind map that was a prompt from the artist Stephanie Sajuco in her theory class at UC Berkeley, and is kind of a method that I still use, or sort of like bubble thought diagrams, when I'm thinking about a lot of different ideas and sort of the pathways between them. This one turned out to feel like kind of like some kind of whole earth catalog in some way. I was really glad and still believe in the center here of building in an escape portal or an eject button from some of these systems. When I set up games or rules, I also always find a way to kind of wriggle out of them. I just think this meme is really funny. I've shared it in my classes, and it's also just kind of a reminder for me of like not to get too carried away, getting too complicated or too much stuck in the brain about these ideas, but to like kind of really embody the fun and the simplicity of the Labrador versus the Wolverine. This was a wall work that I did. Began to do wall paintings for shows that I was invited to. This was a piece that I did for Chain Reaction. It was a contemporary artist and situated within Rube Goldberg work. So they would have like Rube Goldberg drawings next to our work. And it was at the Tang Museum at Skidmore College. And it was exploring the role of the mechanical and absurdity in increasing electronic age. But at this point in 2002, it feels like that was just getting started. And these wall works contained painted, cut out elements that I would affix to the surface of the murals. So they had sort of like this tactile quality to them. And I still think of like that Pat the Bunny book that's like a kid's book that has like, you know, touch the cotton ball or touch daddy's, you know, beard. It has this sort of like, I don't know, very simple change of going from two-dimensional space to three-dimensional space in a flat way. But I was really excited about E.O. Wilson's concept of consilience, which had been described as the synthesis of knowledge from different fields. It's like this project of conjoining the sciences with the humanities, attempting to create a new interdisciplinary language. This was a piece that I did for the luggage store gallery in San Francisco. It's called 2 Points of Beacon and had been inspired by a poem by Baudelaire's Beacon from Flowers of Evil. This was another wall work that I did for an exhibition called Entropic Meltdown at the Stedelijk Bureau Museum in Amsterdam. And the imagery for it was inspired initially by this drawing that I saw from a surgeon, Wilfred Penfield, who illustrated which parts of the brain control different parts of the body. So, you know, you're seeing the painted cutouts over here that are affixed to the surface of the mural. And I had included like little mirrors along within the work too, and just was excited about the idea of when you were closer to the mural that you'd sort of like catch your eye looking at itself. So it was sort of like feeding back into looking at the mural. I was approached by the Max Planck History of Science at one point to have one of my wall works on the cover of their book. Called Culture and Experiment. It's about tissue cultures and nerve cultures, cybernetics, bioinformatics, and the physiology of the impossible. In the brave new world of laboratory life, Pavlov meets Nietzsche, Strindberg meets Crick and Watson. In other words, the experiment turns out to be a cultural factor that has so far been largely underestimated. Again, I feel like this has become so accelerated in our culture. And when I asked why my work, Henry Schmidgen just said, we think that your experimental, you know, vision is doing what our book subject is trying to get on about. So that was really interesting. In Adam Curtis's BBC documentary, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace, in part 2, there's this section called the Use and Abuse of Vegetational Concepts. And it sort of parachutes one onto an island of a lot of terrain that I've been thinking about in my work. And I just wanted to play this Richard Brautigan poem. He's reading his poem, All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace.
I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think, right now please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they were flowers with spinning blossoms. I like to think it has to be of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of loving grace.
I just really love that ending of the gopher there. With the shadow. So for the exhibition that was the sister show at the Berkeley Art Museum show during our final MFA exhibition, it was co-joined with the hippie modernism show, and this book, The Struggle for Utopia. And it was just like kind of really kismet that I had the opportunity, I feel like, to be in concert with this exhibition. This is a great book. And, you know, it kind of zeroes in on a lot of the key kind of experimental work going on during that time. Also, this book, Inventing Kindergarten, I think is really interesting and attests to the influences of the principles of unity, holism, and interconnectedness that its lessons had on the artists and architects who attended its teachings included Piet Mondrian, Paul Klee, Kandinsky, and Frank Lloyd Wright. And this artist, Eamon O'Kane, was doing installations kind of based on the influence of kindergarten on modernism. This was a reimagined view that I collaged, a digital collage that I did with green public spaces outside my painting studio in downtown Los Angeles during the pandemic. And I was thinking, you know, I probably have a little bit of influence from the kindergarten and Montessori school I went to too. And I get it, like not everyone's idea of, you know, a groovy space is for everyone. Not everyone wants my dog Noble lording over them. I began actually having, you know, getting involved with public art, being invited to do a work for the San Francisco Arts Commission. And this piece is called Evolves a Luminous Flora. They wanted me to reimagine a parklet that was south of Market, and it's situated right near 6th Street. And like the sort of burning Buckminster Fullerene on the hippie modernism book, it had a short-lived life. And it got demoted back to a street. I think it's still there, maybe in its tamped asphalt kind of form, but I'm not sure that the color is still there. It's demoted back to a street, but it did get in the last page of this beautiful book that the San Francisco Arts Commission put out about the history of public art in San Francisco. This was a mosaic that I did for the U.S. Art and Embassies program. It's in Serbia. It was created by Miato Mosaics, who I continue to work with today. And for some of you living in the Bay Area, you may recognize remnants of the Saturn clock mural that was created for the new skate park that went in south of Market Street. And creating that project was like extreme muraling. It was just an insane project. It too had, you know, well, it actually had about a good 2-year run, I think, as is, and you know, like a sand. I think of it kind of like a sand painting, you know, a mandala sand painting that starts to disappear. I think maybe the top part of this upper canvas might still be there. But it actually had a longer run than most of my, you know, projects that I had done in museums and galleries had. This is another mosaic that I did for a project that I created called the West Tampa Promenade. I've been asked to create something through the City of Tampa Commission for artwork for the Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park. And it combined creating a mosaic within an activity deck. So it's seated next, this piece is seated next to a splash pad. And Miato Mosaic did the tessellatum tile work, and then a dear friend of mine who also works at Ruby's Clay Studio in San Francisco, Andrew DeWitt, did the sculptural tile work for the mosaic. Across from the mosaic, I asked the landscape architect if it wouldn't be cool to collaborate with them and integrate some artwork into the space that they had planned for the table tennis and you know, bocce ball and domino area. And so I worked to create some custom cement tile flooring and seating tiles within the space. During my MFA period at Berkeley, I dove into a multifaceted field of study of all things plants and gardening. And I'm going to show you some examples of those, including like, robotic gardening and encyclopedias and illuminated manuscripts, herbals, botanical encyclopedias, countless images. I found amazing images of flowers and learned about their tricks and mimicry and communications and just got really into it. This piece is called Data Herbatica, 100 Uses for an Herbarium, number 64, provide inspiration for painters. And that was actually from 100 Uses for an Herbarium listing for an herbarium and what it could be used for. I became transfixed with the notion of space gardening when I learned about NASA's space gardening program. And so all of these things combined kind of landed in this project, which really, in lieu of doing a more formal thesis in our MFA program, we were prompted to create a parallel artist statement by Alan D'Souza. And so I created this speculative poem called The Electric Space Gardeners, which was about these gardeners that lived in these virtual gardens who were 1/3 human, 1/3 plant, and 1/3 machine. And it became published, and I created drawings based on the stanzas of the text, published through the Center for Expanded Poetics in Montreal. And when the Bay Area composer Wayne Grimm saw my poem and the drawings, he said, "These are musical. I would love to work with these." And so we began to collaborate, and he worked with the stanzas of the poem and the imagery to create score. And then I, from his prompts, treated the text to 8 scenes in sort of an expanded way, working towards stagecraft of the text, and began to create paintings and costumes and characters to bring to life. This is so, and they have characters like Soliana, the gardener, on the left, and the solar imagery is the circadian rhythm, which in the opera regrounds the gardeners back to their memories of being human once the garden got hit by a virus. And I have to say, this was right before the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic hit, we were in the throes of bringing this to life. And so it was really just this bizarre thing where it was sort of like art imitating life. Wilhelmina, the plant oracle plays a large part in the opera as well. This is a little clip that I'm going to share with you that I created from inside my phone through the Instagram kind of like story function, along with other apps on your phone, and one of the first scores that Wayne was creating. So there was a CD release of the project last fall, and it lives on Bandcamp if you're interested in listening closer to the score or getting the CD. We're also interested in bringing this project to life and have been approaching venues or looking for producers to help us bring it to life. So if anyone's out there that knows of venues or avenues to bring it to the stage, get at us. We'd love to do that. Another plant oracle, flashing with yes, maybe, or no. Brian Eno is really one of my heroes, and his concept of gardening, not architecture, um, has really been influence on me. I just love his mercurial creative process, his idea of having a set of seeds that you kind of carefully tend and then drop them into the dirt and to see what will grow up versus sort of the idea of top-down planning. Really inspires me. Bringing the dice into, a chance operation with the work, it's sort of like tapping into claromancy, or this form of lot casting, which has a history of using dice, pebbles, or bones. The definition of sortition or casting of lots. It's believed to reveal that there's also a will of a deity involved. Yeah. So there's like a factor of divination for me at play too, I feel like, with this process, and a desire to co-create and collaborate beyond myself. Maybe it's from being an only child and making up, games to play with by myself. But this idea of like, fate plus choosing or chance and choice. So working with the cut-up methods from the Beats and Brian Geison's, Burroughs' ideas really helped me to liberate all of my ideas from my sketchbooks and bring them into a field of potential where really anything can happen. And then I also have to respond to it. So it's sort of like, it throws the ball and I have to swing. Also, color, plays a really big part in my work, carries a lot of, I feel like, the vibe of it, the expression of it, and the relationship between color systems and numbers or ordering systems. Sort of the idea of throwing, color choices into a randomness, sort of like pollination happening randomly, with my ideas about it like being close to a natural process. Color orders are also like largely wayfinding systems through information and hallways and systems. So I think about it like that, running through the work in that way. This is my dog, Noble. So the love affair between the grid and the rhizome continues, in meaning that, that it's really about getting at, like when you're creating something from nothing, it's sort of like the pictorial space that you're creating. It comes out of a structure, and thinking about how you're putting that structure into place. It's always been, like the good problem or the next like solve. And so this guy Manuel Lima, in his book of trees, writes about how it's we get in sticky problems when it's reductive, and that it's really more about, when we're describing complex systems, more kind of like meshworks or swampy root systems, or like the internet. And I was looking at this diagram about the problems of simplicity, say in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries, to the problems of disorganized complexity in the 20th century, to where we are now, which is like the problems of organized complexity. And so, it was this idea of the meshwork where I started thinking about bringing in this language of more of a meshy, sloshy, liquid element of the paint. And I was, looking at my palettes and going, well, I'm just going to start introducing these directly into the piece and see what happens. And they really started to kind of like, turn into different things. By the time I was at Berkeley and studying there, I was thinking about, the primordium cells of the plants, and kind of like how that related to a meshwork, and how the primordial cell was like this zone of becoming for growth, and how these zones of becoming could be for a growth in the painting. And so they got into these real like slippery, areas of meshworks. The mesh works, then continuing in experimenting with them, I was taking my palettes and stringing them together. Then I was taking the palettes, cutting them down, rendering them into units and jump ringing them together. And then reintroducing them back into the painting, thinking about how fabric operated within classical painting, like drapery, leading the eye from one place to the other. During the pandemic, I was thinking a lot about like patterns and security envelope patterns and how they have this utility in our lives. And I made a securities series of T-shirts that were to protect the wearer from the pandemic virus. Composition notebook pattern, and thinking about how patterns function in our everyday. I started dropping these into the work more and more. Plork is the one responsible act necessary for human advancement and represents the ecstasy we feel when we work, and when work and play are one. Sister Karita Kent is really inspiring for me. Art does not come from thinking, but from responding. Work is often done by playing around. I totally agree. And then Blake Gopnik, the art critic. Fine art, as we know it, has only existed for about 500 years. Prior to that, its use value was a way to conjure your favorite gardener to show how important you were. The purpose of art today are like games of cogitation. Fine art is a game, was his quote. And also citing here the influence of Charles and Ray Eames, particularly their solar-powered do-nothing machine, and just also their play and iteration, the game aspect of it, and the potential of the kind of protean play of it. This was a mural that I did for Facebook called What's Doing Daisy Chain, sort of showing you as you move along. Going to forward that. Just a shout out to my dear friend Christine Shields, who's also an alumni of San Francisco Art Institute. She has been my ride or die throughout some of these mural installations. She's an incredible artist, painter, and musician. Go check out her work. But she's really been just really fun to paint with on some of my murals. This was one that we did for a private commission at Neuro 42 in San Francisco. That is a brain scanning technology.
As an intellectual vibration, smack dab in the middle of something. That's because there's so many different greens inside the green. And each one has a different IQ. There's the green that should never have happened. The stupid green.
That's Ken Nordine from his album Colors. So yeah, really this idea of the painting as a game, I started really having an intention with setting up more tightly based rules, but then also like escaping from them. Rules really inject meaning and define the parameters of the game. And this was a series I did in 2018, I believe. Introducing the palette into it and/or scraps of fabric that I would find, going to my studio. I work in a garment manufacturing building in downtown Los Angeles. And, that was one of the prompts, to find scraps of material to introduce into the work. Replay all together now. During the pandemic, the survival slogan "Apart Together" really found its way to creating a series called Flower Games. So it was all about that, wayfinding and the lines that we waded in to stay apart, to be together. created kind of like this twister game in my studio where it was about, the flowers serving as proxies for ourselves and looking at the space that was between us as a positive space, not a negative space. And I was starting to paint these borders around the pieces directly onto the wall. Circular garden. These pieces have collage in them as well, the painted plastic palettes, also flocking elements, stencil work, and embroidery thread. Venus and Flora, going back to the Greco-Roman mythology of Flora, the goddess of flowers, and bringing Venus, the protector, steward of all the gardens, into the work, thinking of fertility goddesses and making the gardens grow, inspired me to do this series where I was like positioning these feminine qualities and bodies within the painting. Again, working from left to right, I would like work with the rules and go from image to image or shape to shape with them. This one's called Synthesizer. Crea's round. This one's called Multiplier, has another garland in it. And this was also inspired by this pinball game that I saw called Multiplier that had, featured the pinball game was like this wild woman that was making the game happen. Watch out for snakes. Sky rounds. And then I created a board game called Anything Grows for a commission that I got through the El Segundo Public Library, where the gameplay co-created the floral imagery for the mural through participant gameplay. So I created these seed cards that assign goals to the players, and the action cards, which are the arrows, directed the collage actions. Once the players performed the prompts on the seed cards, they would come back and then collage kind of like the symbols or emblems of what they had found onto the flowers that I provided them for the game. And this is sort of what it looked like when I brought all of the flowers back to the studio and all of the cut up pieces of paper. I really wanted to work with like the order that they had been, packed in at the last minute and sort of let that also dictate how it would shape the mural. So it was part scavenger hunt, part collage workshop. The flowers imagery reflected the player's experience and the creative responses to the prompts of the game and the side of the library that included going out onto the landscape and finding things in the landscape. So I was playing with, really wanting to bring the participants into exploring ideas of psychogeography, but also the really particulars of the library. And I called it the sensory garden. So right now I'm working on a series in the studio called Bouquet Play, and I'm pulling from the language of flowers, which was a Victorian era sort of secret language bouquet making practice that was like coded language through the flower. So again, this idea of kind of utilizing the flower or the relationship of florals. In medieval Latin, a florilegium was a compilation of excerpts or sentia from other writings and is an offshoot of the commonplace book tradition. The word literally means a gathering of flowers or collection of fine extracts from the larger body of work. Think of an anthology. The metaphor being that pressing your favorite excerpts of literature into a book was like assembling a bouquet. So now I'm like working with what was formerly a brain dump as a florilegium and also assigning my dice with more specific prompts. And I'm working with the text that I'm arriving at using both the negative and positive spaces of the cutout letters of the words as a way to generate the flowers, kind of like an S-curve drawing tool. I'm thinking about the relationships between nature and cultivation, language, color, materials, and process. Also just the fever of these large-scale language models that are shaping artificial intelligence around us right now. and how this might land in a still life bouquet of flowers. Showing some of the collage process now from the meshwork paint pots. Room to Bloom. This work was created with the word strength. I also create flower essences and I add the water into my paint. I think of it as that like passage and scene is forgetting the name of the thing one sees, that life of contemporary artist Robert Irwin book where Weschler writes about like a cherry painted sports car that it's so completely painted and that even the inside of the glove box is painted. So this idea that, you know, you're not seeing maybe the paint job, but you know it's there. And it's sort of just this intention to get the essence of the flower into the materials itself of the painting. Two Eyes, Blue Gazer, Heart Center. This piece was created by the word lack, which I saw everywhere when I did a residency, a guerrilla residency at the IKEA here in the Burbank IKEA. And it's a residency where artists are finding inspiration in IKEA. And I was inspired by a lot of the kind of utopic language that's going on in there. But then, you know, just this word lack is everywhere. And I thought that contrast was pretty wild and worked with it to create this bouquet Eye on You. Yeah, I had to show that. And I'll leave you with this last bouquet play from the word palimpsest, which is a beautiful word, given to me by the woman who helped me print the Electric Space Gardener risograph in Canada. And it's in conversation here with a chair collaboration with my partner of Bingo Furniture and Design, who we work sometimes together to make objects for domestic space. And I'm going to leave you here with plans for a 180-foot mixed media custom tile mural for a historic gateway in Tampa. The project will include seed bombing the hillside with local wildflowers next to this new pedestrian walkway, which is planned for this year. Let's see, we'll see if it installs this year or maybe it will install next year. But I created just a little bit of a animation here to give a sense of what it would feel like as you walked through it or drove by. And a lot of the imagery is informed from poems from the community and also from the arts and crafts period and the bungalows that the historic area is so celebrated for. You can kind of see that the plan involves creating a painted mural on the wall, and then what is seen here are the actual like custom made tiles that will be on top of the mural. So that's the plan. And whoops, sorry. Thank you very much. That concludes my talk. That's my studio view in downtown Los Angeles. I'll stop sharing my screen now. And
Thank you so much, Jovi. That was so incredibly inspiring. Now I like have this very long list of books that I need to buy, and it was so wonderful to get inside of your head for those 40 minutes there and learn about your process, your inspiration, and wow, I'm really blown away. And while people are busy writing their questions for you in the chat, I wanted to know, do you have any upcoming shows where we can see your work in the near future?
I'm working on that. I have a lot of work in the studio that is ready for, I think, group shows or solo. I've definitely got a solo show's worth in the studio at this point. Yeah, I've just been bunkered down since the pandemic, and going in and sweeping the studio floor and lighting some incense and carrying on. So nothing
Yeah.
really to report. Right now, there is a closer for the IKEA residency next Saturday here in Los Angeles. There's an exhibition for that that I'm in right now.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I also, I have one of your beautiful scarves that you printed, and I wanted to ask you about your t-shirts that you made, because now I realize, like, I need to have one of your t-shirts. Are they available for sale on your website?
I believe they are. I don't know if my store is still, sometimes I'll like make it active when I have an offering and then I'll inactivate it. But I think that they're still on my Shape Zoo portal, which is my shop on my website. But I have a few of those securities shirts left, as well as I have a few of the Electric Space Gardener poems left as well. If anyone's interested, you can always reach out to me directly. And
The poems are in book format, or the CD. You mentioned a CD as well.
yeah. Wayne Grimm, who is the composer of the music, released the CD this past fall, and it's available on Bandcamp. It's quite something what he did with the text. And yeah, his process also, he's got the honor the error as hidden intention. He's got that quote on his studio wall. So when I saw that, I thought this is a really good pairing of us working together. And he also is at the Exploratorium and just sonified the eclipse with a project that his wife Phoebe did there. And Phoebe also just created a video for the Electric Space Gardeners that I think they're going to release soon. So
Wonderful. If anybody has any questions, you can either or comments, you can either raise your hand and share them with the group, or put them in the chat. We would love to hear your questions.
I see one. Oh yeah. How did you get started with public art? Yeah, that was through the San Francisco Arts Commission on an invitation initially to propose something. And then once I became familiar with the process, I started applying to them and still do. I probably, applied to a good 20 to 25 things, maybe a year. Not just public art projects, but I find that, the more rejections I get, the more I know that I'm kind of showing up and doing my end of things. And I try to get those rejections stacked high. But there are calls that are called requests for qualifications, and you can find them on like a site called Cafe Calls, and Public Artists, I believe, has them. Yeah.
Did that comment pop up on your personal chat?
Yeah, I'm seeing some questions here. Why did you choose living in LA? Oh yeah. I think it's sort of experience, something new. I seem to live in places for like 9 years. I lived in downtown Brooklyn for 9 years, and then moved back to the Bay Area and lived there for about 9 years. And I don't know, exploration, journey, opportunity, something new. I also felt like, San Francisco, I was getting a little heartbroken with the tech over to be honest, a little bit. And feeling like it was funny when I first moved down here, my husband and I like going to even like the Trader Joe's, you know, we'd report back and be like, our people, they're here, you know, like, like there were people smiling at Trader Joe's. Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, just for something new. Do you listen to music when you work? Absolutely. I'm continuously listening to music. And yeah, kind of broke down and started doing the whole Spotify thing just because my archive got decimated by Apple. Thanks, Apple. So yeah, I listen to a lot of different things. I think I have a public playlist on there that's avant tonal, which is kind of like Terry Riley stuff, meeting a lot of experimental stuff. So I have like good zone music I like to get into, and then a lot of good 80s, you know, punk music. And then I have like I don't know, more like folks and roots playlist that's yeah, I love all forms of music, but I am a music nut. Um, do I garden? I garden in the studio mostly. I do tend to my plants. I have plants both indoors and outdoors that I tend to. But I'm not an active gardener at my local garden. I think it's really like more like I said, it's like my ideas of gardening are tied with my creative practice. And but I do try to keep my house plants healthy. I was thinking, should I put googly eyes on this one behind me for for the talk, but I didn't.
Jovi, do you see any other questions coming up? I see a hand raised by Kathy Johnson. Kathy, do you want to unmute?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Yeah, ah, I went back in the 70s. I was at the Art Institute. It was the most wonderful time of my life, period. I live in Seattle now, and I kind of got on this big nature kick where I had to be near nature. And so that would be, I don't know. I'm finding it hard to find a large enough space to work because of the cost of living. I left the Bay Area for that reason.
Mhm.
I miss the Bay Area, but it really did go through a big change, like you said. Yeah. So anyway,
But you know, it's a boom and bust town and it will have other cycles. I mean, when I arrived from, you know, living in Brooklyn back in 2004, I know a lot of people had fled from the initial .com bomb, right? And but I mean, it's sort of like it has its life cycle and yeah. But I mean, Los Angeles is getting really expensive. You know, initially it felt like it was a lot cheaper, but the expenses are climbing
yeah,
around. A
same,
girlfriend of mine sent me an image of strawberries in Brooklyn being $18.99 a pound. I mean, who like it's crazy. Everything seems just really expensive right now.
Yeah, it's happened in Seattle as well. It's like once the computers come, that's what changes everything.
Mm.
Yeah. So do you earn a living through various things or mostly through your art?
Well, it's been a combination of things. I've been teaching for about 18 years.
Mm.
And that's felt like also part of my work along with the public art practice. And I don't have a gallery right now. I used to work with Gregory Lynn Gallery in San Francisco, but he closed. So yeah, it's a combination of these things. I'm about to start teaching again. I was at USC and Cal State Long Beach, and I'm going to start teaching at Los Angeles Valley College in the LA Community College District, which I'm excited about. So but yeah, it's definitely a combination of things, how I survive. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, it's a lot to keep it all afloat. Fortunately, I have really, pretty cheap studio space in the building in downtown LA that I share with 2 other artists, and it helps keep it all going on.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
we're on time here, Ujjaini. I think we're about to wrap it up today. So we are so happy to have had you today, Jovi. Thank you for your time and everyone for showing up.
Thank you so much for having me.